Okay, so let's start. So last week we covered the metta meditation. Then we have seen at the end how the metta meditation is connected with, in our text, with 16 topics, 16 practices, which include actually all the important aspects, or almost all the important aspects of the Buddhist yoga. So this metta attitude is actually, as taught in the scriptures, it's the base for all other positive attitudes. Today we're going to handle the following topic, compassion. Now, according to the bodhisattva path, you will find, for example, in Asanga's Abhidharmakosa, actually the compassion, or the great compassion, Mahakaruna, in the path of the bodhisattva, is said to cover, to contain, to comprise all the Brahmaviharas. All the Brahmaviharas are said to be comprised for a bodhisattva in the practice of the karuna. So Sutra Alamkara, for example, Asanga also says that the if the bodhisattva practice we imagine as a tree, so the root of this tree is the great compassion. The stem of this tree is said to be kshanti, the endurance. It is very important to see how the great compassion is connected with endurance. Due to love, Nagarjuna says, the bodhisattva does great acts. Great acts are based in endurance. No one can do great acts without endurance. No matter whether great evil deeds or great good deeds, they are based in endurance. If we don't have endurance, we are unable to do anything of great importance. So we will see the next after compassion is joy. And Kumarajiva takes joy to be based in precisely in endurance. There is no genuine joy without endurance. So you can see how inventive, how the Buddhist teachers were. Using the same principles, they come to opposite conclusions, but actually they are all interlinked. In the Visuddhimagga, you will see the metta is the base for endurance. The practice of endurance is metta, according to Buddhaghosa. According to Asanga, the great compassion is the cause of endurance. And in Kumarajiva's, we will see concept, the great joy is what leads to endurance. And we should understand why. This is very important. So, according to the Mahayana Sutras, you will find also in Nagarjuna, the understanding of the great compassion is equal to deeper understanding of anatta, to deeper understanding of the selflessness. We have deeper understanding of selflessness when we understand the great compassion. This is very important. Why? Because, for example, Lankavatara Sutra, which is so important in Chinese tradition, teaches that the bodhicitta is based on 4 kinds of samatha. If one is aspiring to be a bodhisattva, he has to practice 4 kinds of samatha. Nagarjuna says that in order to practice the bodhisattva path, one needs, we will see it later in regard to Kumarajiva's explanation of joy, in order to practice the great path, one needs the real mind, Jenshin. The real mind is based in faith. Actually, Vasubandhu in Abhidharmakosa defines faith or Shraddha as prema, as love. To love is to have faith. This is very significant. Then when we have the real mind, which is, he explains as the faith in Buddha. Here, of course, Buddha is the Dharmakaya Buddha. The Buddha of the highest reality, standing for the highest reality. And this Jenshin, the real mind, leads to the samatha mind, to the mind which sees things from the point of view of their sameness. Sameness, according to Lankavatara, in terms of dharmas, from the point of view of highest reality, all dharmas are same. Not from the point of view of conventional reality, but they are same in the nature of selflessness. The nature of selflessness is the nature of selflessness of self-existent nature, of svabhava. Then from understanding of this, then comes the sameness of the sentient beings, Zhongshen Pingtan. All the sentient beings are equal because from the point of view of the highest reality, there is no self nature in them to be found. Then what is to be done is also should be seen from the point of view of sameness. Because what is to be done is to attune to the highest reality. And from the point of view of highest reality, see the phenomena. The Mahayana Sutras teach that when the highest reality is understood, like Ghana-vyuha, when the highest reality is understood, everything is understood. When the highest reality is not understood, then even so we may have a vast knowledge, it will not include all phenomena. Then the Buddha nature. Because we understand the samatha, the sameness of the Dharma, of the sentient beings, and of what is to be done, we understand the Buddha nature. The Buddha nature in all beings. The Buddha nature in all beings is the result of deeper understanding of great compassion. It is explained in the Vinaya when the Buddha realized the Bodhi, he saw all sentient beings as lotus flowers emerged in mud. So this Buddha nature is the real nature of the root, and without the root there is no stem, and when there is stem there will be branches, and the branches, the Sutra Alamkara explains as the Artha Kriya, as benefiting, that acts to benefit the sentient beings. When there are branches, there can be leaves, and the leaves are explained as pranidhi, the vows of the bodhisattva. When there are leaves, there will be flowers. The flowers are explained as superior birth. One has to have superior birth with sharp faculties and in good circumstances to be able to do great deeds. And the superior birth is the cause or the conditions for getting the supreme realization, the Mahabodhi, the great Bodhi. So this is the importance of great compassion. So in Chinese Buddhism, the great advocate of this great compassion is precisely Kumarajiva. He has most of his works actually are propagating the great compassion. But you will see in this work, which is kind of possibly a compilation from his discourses to the disciples, the practice of compassion is only explained very briefly. And he refers us at the end of the paragraph, he refers us to the Mahayana scriptures, which he is so famous for having translated. So let us see how the text actually deals with this practice of the great compassion or compassion. According to Visuddhimagga, when we practice metta, we start with oneself. I have explained before. Also, there is justification for that. Buddhaghosa says that all sentient beings, what they most care about is the self. Nothing is more dear than the self. Then Asanga and others teachers speak, of course, of the self being the real self, being the Paramatman, not the Atman. Atman is the cause of the kleshas, but not the Paramatman. So the sameness and the deeper understanding of the anatman is in fact connected in the scriptures explaining the practice of the bodhisattva with the understanding of the paramatman. Now, the paramatman, to understand the paramatman, one has to understand the truth of suffering. The compassion is the penetrating the truth of suffering, the generality of the truth of suffering. As Kumarajiva says, Buddha has not taught the truth of happiness, he has taught the truth of suffering. And it is a gate for understanding happiness. The Nirvana Sutra, Mahayana Nirvana Sutra says that the truth of suffering, when understood, when thoroughly understood, becomes the truth of non-suffering. But we do not understand thoroughly the truth of suffering. Now, one starts from the metta, one starts the practice of metta from the self, but Visuddhimagga explained one cannot start the practice of karuna from the self. One has to start the practice of karuna from contemplating, like now Supriyaji says, contemplating the suffering which is obvious, which we meet somewhere on the street, which we meet when we see a relative dying, or a brother dying, or sister dying, those close to us dying. We have to make that picture in the mind and start compassion with that. Then extend it after contemplating that the suffering is cannot be avoided for those who are close to us, for those who are our enemies, for those who are neither close nor enemies. Everybody is subjected to suffering. Now, so in Visuddhimagga you start with one person and expand through this Sima Bheda practice, the breaking of the boundaries between the near one and the enemy and so on, between the self and the other. Then extend in all directions. Now here we will see that you start with contemplating in general way, like the metta has been explained as contemplating the potential of happiness in all sentient beings, which indirectly Kumarajiva connects with the idea of the Buddha nature. Here the general idea of suffering, starting from the most obvious one, the beings in the denizens of hell, hungry ghosts, those in lower destinies, slaughter, hunger, cold, disease. All this is the most clear expression of suffering. We should understand, as Abhidharmakosa and also the Theravada scriptures explain, all this is conventional suffering. The suffering from the highest point of view, from the point of view of highest reality, as Abhidharmakosa explains, is what suffering? Is the suffering of anicca. This is the ultimate suffering. By contemplating this suffering, one gets the idea of the reality of suffering. But the Kumarajiva, as we will see, explains that this also is not the absolute reality. If suffering were the absolute reality, there is no chance for bodhi. So it is only the means. It is not the highest truth. Understanding the suffering is a means for understanding the highest truth, but it cannot be the highest truth, because if it were the highest truth, there is no way to attain any kind of body, because a body and suffering, they are two different entities. So one brings these pictures of suffering here, not starting with one person, but starting with generalizing, and extend to all beings. Now, somebody asks, maybe among his disciples, how can happiness become suffering? Then, of course, I have already explained, because happiness is a temporary state. And if one holds to a temporary state, it will cause suffering. Aryadeva in Chatu Shataka says that too much happiness necessarily leads to suffering, but not vice versa. Too much suffering will never lead to happiness. What does it mean? That suffering is, in a way, more close to reality, but it is not the whole of reality. If it is understood as whole of reality, then no way to attain bodhi. But suffering is more real than happiness, because the wisdom is, in Buddhism at least, connected with penetration of the truth of suffering. Without penetrating the truth of suffering, we don't get the liberating wisdom. Impossible. Whatever path we practice, no matter whether the path of disciples, paths of the bodhisattvas, without understanding suffering, no way to attain bodhi. This is very important. All this, of course, is understanding of suffering is the means, as far as the bodhisattva practice is concerned, for understanding the, as I have explained, the anatta in a deeper way. What means understanding anatta, selflessness, in a deeper way? Understanding that, as Nagarjuna explains in Mula Pragya, and as Kumarajiva explains in a wonderful way in his translation of commentary to the Mahapragya Paramita Sutra, it says, Nagarjuna says that the samsara and nirvana cannot be understood as being different from the point of view of the highest reality, of course, not from the point of view of the conventional reality. And the conventional reality and highest reality is defined in a different way in the scriptures of the bodhisattvas and in the scriptures of the Shravaka. It is very important to understand that aspect. So from the point of view of the highest reality, there cannot be any difference between samsara and nirvana, because the only element which applies to all phenomena is anatta. The anicca does not apply to all phenomena. The dukkha does not apply to all phenomena. The annihilation does not apply to all phenomena, but the anatta does. There is no exception to anatta. So it implies all phenomena. And this deeper understanding of anatta makes us realize that there cannot be logically any difference between samsara and nirvana from the highest point of view. And when one understood the highest point of view, the Mahayana Sutras explain, one has understood everything. So this is the pragya, the transcendental wisdom. And the Dharmakaya Vimalakirti Sutra teaches that Dharmakaya is born out of panya, out of pragya, due to the deeper understanding of the practice of the 4 Brahma Viharas. This is very wonderful explanation. Due to the deeper understanding of the practice of Brahma Viharas, the body is born of transcendental wisdom. No matter how we practice the Buddhist path, there is no body without transcendental wisdom. The essence of body is the transcendental wisdom. Disciples cannot attain without transcendental wisdom. Pratyeka Buddhas cannot attain. The bodhisattvas cannot attain. So attainment presupposes the transcendental wisdom. But for the bodhisattva, this transcendental wisdom is rooted in great compassion. And great compassion contains, as we have explained, all 4 Brahma Viharas. This is a very deep explanation and very deep understanding. It is easy to explain, but it is very difficult to practice. Now, according to Abhidharmakosa, you will find a great discussion in the 6th chapter. The Abhidharmakosa explains this famous passage of the Agamas, Yam Vedaitam Tam Sabam Dukhasmin. Whatever we can feel and we experience something because we feel it, all that is connected with suffering. All that is inside suffering. So whatever we experience is inside suffering. So a great question discussed in Abhidharmakosa, if that is true, then the happiness is not true. So some teachers believe happiness is just an illusion. Others advocate that Buddha has taught indeed happiness to exist. You will find it everywhere in the Agamas, that happiness, sukha, is the opposite of dukkha. So the discussion finally is almost undecided. Difficult to decide. So Vasubandhu, without making any real one-sided conclusion, just skips over the conclusion. But if we take this deeper understanding of anatta, then the conclusion is very easy to make. What conclusion? The suffering indeed exists, but in the relative truth. So this text, Kumarajiva explains that this experience of suffering is common to all forms of life, no matter whether in our sphere of experience based on the five senses. Most of the time we think about the objects of the five senses. This is how our karma is. It is also in omnipresent even in the highest spheres of subtle form and of formless sphere, because impermanence is there. Impermanence is included in the experience of happiness. How do we know? This is very important. We practice the jhanas, then we know. That's why first Kumarajiva explained the jhanas, then he explained the metta and so on. You practice the jhanas, how do you get the knowledge that the happiness is impermanence? And impermanence is, of course, connected with suffering, and the suffering is connected with selflessness, because that what suffers cannot have a self-existent nature, cannot have an Atman. And being in the state of impermanence is equal to being in the state of not suffering. We cannot use here word suffering, but the state of non-fulfillment. Dukkha can be translated as the stage of not being contented. But at the same time, Abhidharmakosa teaches that the contentment is the cause of meditation. If we are not contented, we cannot meditate. Now, the feeling, according to Buddhism, like Abhidharmakosa explained, feeling is the cause of vipaka, is the cause of resultant karma. Because we are attached to feeling, we produce the resultant karma. And according to resultant karma, according to vipaka, be it alaya or be it bhavanga, we are reborn. Our state, how we are reborn is based in the base mind. And this base mind is also a product of holding to the sensations. So no matter in what state of existence one is, higher or lower, his conditioning of rebirth will be decided in accordance with the causes and conditions of resultant karma based on Vedana. So the Kumarajiva asks, so what happiness is there for all the sentient beings? Then again explaining all these sufferings. And here he comes to a very important conclusion. Therefore, all beings without exception suffer. Why? Because we are in the state of impermanence. Now, the religious literature, among others philosophy, like Socrates, say that the real beauty is eternal. And real beauty has to be found in impermanence itself. So this is why the Kumarajiva's conclusion, all beings who do not know the reality of suffering can be commiserated with, because it is through the penetration of suffering that we know, as Nirvana Sutra teaches, Mahayana Nirvana Sutra, we know no suffering. It is through penetrating the suffering that we know no suffering. This seems to be a paradox, but it is a very deep understanding, based precisely, as we have explained, on the Pragya Paramita, on the transcendental wisdom. And transcendental wisdom can only arise from the deeper understanding of the conventional reality. This is the emphasis of Buddhism. This is what makes Buddhism different from other religious concepts. We have to go into the deeper penetration of the conventional reality in order not to be deluded about the highest reality, which then, as we have explained, from the point of view of the bodhisattva path, is the only reality. Because, as we have explained, the anatta includes all the phenomena and makes all the phenomena equal from the point of view of the absolute reality. So it is able to equalize the suffering and happiness. This is the perfect detachment. It does not mean that a realized person does not have suffering, does not have attachment. But he, as Asanga explains, he does not, he feels without feeling. Khema Sutta explains in the Agamas that Buddha Kumarajiva never tired of encouraging us to contemplate on the Buddha to meditate on the Buddha. This was a main meditation advocated in China. And maybe it is greatly due to his activities that this method of meditating on the Amitabha Buddha, on the Buddha as being the symbol of the highest reality, became the most important practice in the so-called Chinese transmission of Buddhism. So Kumarajiva says that beings are to be commiserated, are to be pitied because they give rise to the thought of happiness while being caught in mental perversion, of believing happiness to be something self-existent, of seeing happiness as something self-existent, and of thinking of happiness as being something self-existent. So because of that, Kumarajiva explained the beings in this life and next life experience all kinds of worries and vexations without being disenchanted, without nirveda, nibbeda. The nirveda is the key to wisdom. In the Theravada Buddhism, we explain the paramis. First you have the Nekkhamma parami, then you have the Panya parami. The Nekkhamma, the Naishkramya, the renunciation, is based in Nirveda. In Nirveda we can translate, Bhikkhu Bodhi translate as disenchantment. I have used this word also. It is a very good translation. Before they use disgust, which is not really, but disenchantment actually means a state of non-contentment. So if one reflects in this way, that means you put into the practice of compassion the idea of sameness, as I have explained, in terms of the deeper understanding of anatta, in the sense of absence of self-existent nature in all phenomena, beings, and the dharmas as well. So when we actually visualize and understand the beings as experiencing suffering even without being aware of it, this is the mind of compassion. And now in the end, what is very interesting, he explains for other meanings of compassion one can refer to the explanation of the four illimitable abodes in the Mahayana treatise. So I have tried from here to explain some basic ideas how important the practice of compassion is, how it is the base for the bodhicitta practice, and the bodhicitta practice includes, according to the scriptures explaining the practice of bodhisattva, the bodhicitta practice includes for the bodhisattvas all practices without exception. All, there is no exception. So the progress towards bodhi is the progress of bodhicitta. This is how Asanga explains in the Bodhisattva Bhumi of the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. So next we will touch it today and continue next week. After compassion comes joy. They very closely related to each to the other. According to the Agamas, the opposite of joy is arati. The joy is rati, which means joy, and arati means non-joy, literally. But the non-joy includes many, many things. It includes the tendency to be jealous. It includes the tendency to accumulate, to be miserliness. It includes boredom. When we have no joy, we are bored. Now, for Kumarajiva, which is very interesting, if you study Visuddhimagga, the Southern tradition, how do you start the practice of mudita, of joy or sympathetic joy? Maybe joy is enough, no need to add sympathetic. That is sometimes not necessary and misleading, especially in this case, when we read the explanation of practice of joy in the Kumarajiva's concept. He explains, Buddhaghosa explained the practice of joy by contemplating a person, starting with one person who, so to say, has the some of the characteristics that one aspires for, or which say is the represents that which one aspires for, be it wealth, be it wisdom, be it virtues, all the good things one would like to enjoy, which makes one happy. Now, according to Abhidharmakosa, and this is very interesting, we have seen there are great differences in explaining the Brahma Viharas in the northern tradition and in the southern tradition. In the northern tradition, we have seen the practice of metta starts, according to Kumarajiva, with the fourth dhyana. So first he explained the practice of the four dhyanas, then he starts explaining metta. We have also explained that metta is linked to the beautiful liberation, third liberation of the 8 liberations, which is practiced in the fourth dhyana in all traditions. So this is a link. Now, karuna is also normally practiced in the third dhyana according to Visuddhimagga, but in our text it is not explained, but in Abhidharmakosa and so on, it can go to the higher dhyanas. According to Visuddhimagga, the limit of karuna is the limitless space. When we practice the arupas, then by naturally, when we practice karuna, the mind will jump into the limitless space. So this is also the connection of karuna with sameness. This connection is very much hidden, but we will see that there is connection when we talk about the arupas after finishing this section on the Brahma Viharas. But what is very interesting, according to Abhidharmakosa, not explained here, the practice of joy is only practice in the first two dhyanas. Because the joy, the priti, is in the first two dhyanas. Higher from the first two dhyanas, the no more priti in the third dhyana, of course no more priti in the fourth dhyana. So the priti can exist only in the first and the second dhyana. So we can see the same from different points of view. This is what makes the study of Buddhism so interesting. So much original ideas based on the same roots. The roots are the same, but the explanation change in different traditions. Which tradition is right, which tradition is wrong, one cannot decide. One has to see the reasons for these ways of explaining. This is how one can benefit most from the study of the Buddhist scriptures. So, according to our explanation, the practitioner, one starts the practice of joy. The practitioner is aware of the true characteristic of all phenomena. Now I started to explaining how we understand that all joy, happiness is a state of impermanence due to jhana. What is the importance of jhana practice for the attainment of wisdom, which, as we have explained, is based on deep understanding of suffering. Suffering does not mean suffering, it means state of non-contentment. Now, when one has jhana, I have explained it before, but because it is so important, so I explain it again. When one has jhana, then one can see the same image. We practice jhana based on the mental image. One can see the same mental image at the base of consciousness. Then, when one can identify this same image, then one can see the mind which goes to that image. This is explained as immediately preceding mind. This immediately preceding mind in the first or second jhana is saturated by joy. And one sees also how this joy appears and disappears in each and every moment of cognition. according to Theravada especially, the cognition is a process. The process which has stages. This is peculiarity of Theravada, not in Sarvastivada. These stages, they appear according to the Chitta Niyama, according to the rules of the mind. And rules of the mind is that in Jhana there is no preparatory, there is no stage of receiving the object or deciding about the object or going through the object or going back to the base of the mind. In the case of jhana, moment by moment, the object and the content of the mind remain the same. And it appears and disappears each and every moment. So this is indeed the state of impermanence. All phenomena appear and disappear moment by moment. Whether you explain it as the Chitta Niyama, the rules of the mind, or you explain it as the momentariness itself being the rule, as in Sarvastivada. Without momentariness, no explanation of the anicca. And without anicca, no explanation for dukkha and anatta. So we start, this is very peculiar for this scripture, we start the practice of mudita by becoming aware of the true characteristics of all phenomena. The true what is the true characteristic of all the phenomena? Now, of course, the absence of self-existent nature. This applies to all phenomena without exception. Anicca cannot apply to all phenomena. Dukkha cannot apply to all phenomena. But the anatta is the only samanya lakshana, common characteristic, applicable to all phenomena without exception. So it is the true characteristic. And this true characteristic is the gate to the transcendental wisdom. The Pragya Paramita Sutras actually teach, like Sukranta Vikram in Pragya Paramita, very popular in Tibetan Buddhism, teaches that if transcendental wisdom had an object, it would be ignorance. This is very significant. So we have explained Vasubandhu equals faith to love. So what is the practice of the bodhisattva? The practice of the bodhisattva is the love for the transcendental wisdom. And Kumarajiva, in many different skillful ways, tries to teach this also to the disciples in the sense of the Pragya Paramita Sutras. Because the Pragya Paramita Sutras, the objects were the disciples, the arahats, the Subhuti, Shariputra, Ananda. They are the objects of Buddha's teachings in the Pragya Paramita Sutras. And also in another great work of Kumarajiva, also in the Sadharma Pundarika, in the Lotus Sutra. Kumarajiva is best known for his translation of the Sadharma Pundarika, possibly the most popular sutra in Chinese Buddhism, with the Amitayu Sutra. It teaches also the principle of ekayana, of one yana, to the disciples. Disciples are the receptors of this teaching. So here, this understanding of the transcendental wisdom and the joy from transcendental wisdom, the joy from contemplation of the highest reality, is the gate to the practice of mudita. And how it is explained further, we will learn next week. For this week, let us make stop here. If there are any questions, we ask Supriya to elaborate.
You can unmute yourselves and ask if you have a question.
Bhante, I have a question.
Yeah, so great. I have been waiting for your question.
I actually have a few questions, but I'll just start in case other people want to ask. Thank you very much for that teaching. I had a little bit of internet problem in the last 10 or so minutes, so I missed something and you may have answered it during that time. But actually, this is from earlier. You said we have to go into deeper penetration of conventional reality, not to be deluded about ultimate reality. Can you please expand upon that a bit?
Yes, because the Buddhist truth is based on understanding of the Four Noble Truths. We have to penetrate the Four Noble Truths to penetrate one truth. This is very important. Ultimately, there is only one truth. There cannot be 2, 3, 4, and more truths. But through penetration of many truths, we come to the one truth. And one truth is, from the point of view of the bodhisattva practice, is the fact that you cannot divide the samsaric existence and the nirvanic existence. They are both based on the same phenomena, which is anatta. And anatta is the base for all Buddhist practices. There is no way to understand Buddhism without penetrating the truth of anatta, no matter what body we aspire for. Is it clear? Cheto, where are you?
Maybe she's having some issues with her connection, Bhante.
Issues.
She's there.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
I'm not sure if you...
Yeah, no way. I see Leaf there, so she has problem with computer.
No, I could hear her.
I don't hear anything. I see here Leaf. What does she say?
I think she dropped out. Maybe I could hear in between. Yeah. If anyone else would like to ask a question,
Yeah, pity. Chetso is always active in asking, but she doesn't.
There she is.
I'd like to ask a question, if you'll forgive me. It's a very basic question. I'm unsure. You mentioned at some point in the teaching, if I heard correctly, about anatta, of course, being the central theme and how it's always present. But anicca not always, like you said, there can be instances without dukkha and without anicca. And so I didn't quite understand that bit.
Yes, anicca is only concerned with samsaric existence. Dukkha also with samsaric existence. But anatta has no limitation, no difference between samsaric existence and the highest reality from the point of view of anatta. This is a deeper understanding of Buddhism. Why? Because self-existence is actually impossible. If there is any self-existence, it is contrary to our experience. And the highest reality is to be penetrated through the deeper understanding of our experience. If we divide it from our experience, then we are deluded about the highest reality. This is the depths of, in fact, of all religions. In the deeper understanding of the mystical aspect of the religions. Otherwise, the religions is just stories for children. Right?
Bhante, but it seems anicca and anatta are connected very closely. With dukkha not being samsaric is easier to understand, but anicca not being samsaric is hard to understand somehow.
Well, that is why deeper understanding of transcendental wisdom. Without that, no way. The transcendental wisdom is the condition for body, no matter whether body of the disciple or body of the bodhisattva, all body is based on transcendental wisdom. Impossible to attain body without transcendental wisdom. All those who have become arahats due to transcendental wisdom. And ultimately Buddha is also an arahat. But he is the arahat with dharmakaya. Because he has penetrated the sameness of all phenomena, including samsara and nirvana. Okay? This is a non-dual view. Actually, this non-dual view is also only explanation, but it is very useful explanation. For deeper understanding, the non-dual view is very useful. And this is truth of all religions, of deeper understanding of all religions. Okay, so
Bhante, then from the perspective of the Buddhist tradition, those who believe in a soul but also have claim to moksha or liberation from samsara, then that is a wrong claim from the Buddhist perspective? It is incomplete attainment? How do we understand that?
Well, ultimately all words are misleading. The highest reality is beyond words. This is clearly explained in all so-called scriptures explaining non-dualistic approach. This emphasis is predominant in all non-dualistic approaches. And non-dualistic approaches is the mystical approach. And the mysticism you can only explain by similes, you can only explain by riddles. You cannot explain by logic. It is the logic, as in this non-dualistic sense, is to lead you beyond logic. The best logic is that logic from the religious point of view which leads beyond logic. This is a non-dualistic logic. But it does not mean we don't need logic. On the contrary, the logic is very important. But that logic which leads to the non-dualistic understanding. This is ultimately what is the dialectics about. And dialectics is very important because we are immersed in a process of suffering due to wrong view. This is the Buddhist approach. Because we have wrong view, we have wrong thinking. Because we have wrong thinking, we are involved in all kinds of non-contentment. So the non-dualistic approach then is linked to bhakti, the love. That is there. In Indian history, you can follow very clearly in Hindu teaching, Jhana teachings, the Buddhist teachings, and even in our Western thoughts, you have very similar tendencies. These mystics, they go to non-dualism. The God is a mystery, unreachable, unthinkable. So shall we transfer the merit or any other questions?
Oh, Bhante?
Yeah.
Yes?
I have another question. I got bumped off a couple of times. I apologize. My question is related to some work that you may be familiar with by Richard Gombrich called What the Buddha Thought. And in his 6th chapter of that book, he makes the claim, and he traces it with it seems to be pretty fine scholarship, but he makes the claim that the Buddha did suggest that liberation, ultimate awakening, could be achieved through the practices of love and compassion alone. Can you comment on that?
Well, we have already commented on it.
I think I got bumped off. Yeah, I apologize.
Actually, I have explained that in the scriptures explaining the bodhisattva path, the root of the tree of the bodhi practice, of the bodhicitta practice, is the great compassion. And we have explained in Mahayana scriptures, the great compassion includes all the other three Brahma Viharas. The root is the great compassion. The stem is endurance, kshanti. The leaves, now comes the branches. The branches are the artha kriya, the benefiting deeds to benefit the sentient beings. Then the leaves, they are the pranidhi, the taiyuan, the vows that I practice not to liberate myself, but to liberate all sentient beings. This is the best meanings, deepest meaning of the practice. I practice to cut off all defilements, not only my defilements. I practice to realize all dharmas, not only my personal liberation. And I want to attain the highest, the state of Dharmakaya, the state of perfect Buddhahood. And then the flowers will be the superior birth, in which one has all the good virtues, the sharp intellect, and good conditions for practice. And the fruit will be the ultimate body, the final body. So this is the Mahayana. This is explained in the Mahayana scriptures. So the great compassion is what makes, I have explained, everything equal, based on faith. I quoted the Nagarjuna that bodhisattva practices the real mind, Jenshin, and when he has the real mind, which is the mind of faith in Buddha, then he can practice the Pintangshin, the mind of samatha, the mind of sameness, based on pragya paramita, based on understanding that there is only one truth. There cannot be two truths. This idea you can find also even in the Theravada scriptures. It is there, but not explained. The truth must be one. The whatever is other, that are the means for understanding the one truth. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you so much, Bhante. Thank you.
I have one last question, Bhante.
Okay.
It's not so much to do with Kumarajiva or any of this. But when Shantideva says, may I become the medicine, that's a very beautiful aspiration. But it is of no use to me just now. It only changes maybe my frame of mind, and I feel, oh, I'm doing something good, by this aspiration. As a matter of practice, what must we do in a situation like this, where we are stuck ourselves inside, cannot go anywhere, and we are just condemned?
Yes,
to what
but the
I cannot just be happy with my own frame of mind being tweaked because I have made bodhisattva aspiration. It does not help me, Bhante.
But Shantideva also explains when you cannot cover all earth by leather. You have to start by covering your own feet with leather, then you can walk safe. Right? Is it there?
But nobody is safe.
Nobody is safe, but to be safe in your heart, it is very important. Then you can do the great service. How can you do the great service if you're not safe in your heart? So this faith is the most important aspect and predominant aspect also in the non-dual understanding of Hinduism and Jainism, all Indian practices. It is you can only be of great service to the other when you have find a safe place in your own heart. This is very important. How can you be of great use to others if you have not found island in yourself? This is what Buddha teaches.
Very hard.
Okay, so island in oneself is not a contradiction to be of great use to others. This is from outside it may be a contradiction, but from inside it is a deep truth. So we cannot separate ourselves from others. From this comes a great faith, and from the great faith comes a great certainty. Does it make sense?
Little bit.
Bhante?
Okay.
In connection with what Supriyaji just said, but it's not useless when we do dedication of merit, when we share merit, or when we think of Angulimala's prayer and so forth. Does this affect, or is it only for our benefit, or does it actually have any effect since this is an interdependent reality?
According to Buddhism, this is very important, especially emphasized in the Bodhisattva path. All starts with intention. Without intention, nothing can happen. So the intention is the beginning of all the dharmas. The Buddha says, Chanda Mulika Sabbe Dhamma. All dharmas are based in desire. That means intention here. So even if we can't do anything, if we have good intention, we can be in peace. Because the circumstances are there and nobody can do anything without there being the circumstances. We are all bound to circumstances. So accepting the circumstances and having the positive mind is the right karma, right doing. And on this right karma will be based some good results, but they may not come immediately. This karma is very difficult to gauge. We don't understand the karma. It is not as it seems to be. What does it mean that India is or Even in my country, same, it was really bad situation. It is a result of some bad karma, which karma, so nobody can really gauge. But we can have the good intention, and we can have the security of finding the correct attitude, and then the our path will be clear, and clarity and detachment is the Buddhist path. That does not mean we should not engage. We engage, but we try to engage with clarity and detachment. Then we may not succeed now, but in future we will succeed because we have the right intention. This is the Buddhist faith. The good can only lead to good, but it does not mean it will lead to good immediately. It may take a long, long time, but it will appear. Okay, let us transfer the merit and finish here for today. Okay?
Thank you so much, Bhante. Thank you.